And now I am very glad to take you further in the program into the Talking Barents section. My name is Anja Salo. I work at the Norwegian Barents Secretariat here in Kirkenes. And as Andreas said earlier, we're having this event together with Pikene på broen and the Barents Spektakel. The aim of the Talking Barents concept is to discuss important issues and challenging issues in the Barents region. Tonight's event has the topic, the war on information. It sounds very serious, and it is. After the crisis in Ukraine and the refugee crisis and situation here at the border between Norway and Russia, we have seen many news stories, both on the Norwegian side and on the Russian side, where emotions rather than knowledge has been the main content. And can these simplified stories, in one way, often build on stereotypes and rumors, create an atmosphere of fear? And can that worsen the East-West relations? We hope that tonight's debate will answer some of those questions and give us more knowledge and a better understanding of the situation. And with us today to moderate the panel, we have Arne O. Holm, a very good and well-known editor from High North News. Welcome, Arne. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anja. I think I'll start with some water. I have to wait with the beer, but please enjoy yourself and have a good time. Thanks to Amund for an, as always, very inspiring performance. It's great to have a warming up band like Amund for a debate. Thank you to the audience. There's a lot of you who want to spend the evening together with us, and thank you, of course, to Barents Sekretariat and Pikene, or Pikene, as Børge Brende said yesterday, for organizing this debate. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Transborder Café. My name is, as Anja said, Arne O. Holm. I work at the High North Center for Business and Governance in North University, and I'm also an editor of the Kirkenes newspaper High North News. So I work with words every day, talking, writing, reading, and we are going to talk about how the words are used as a weapon in a possible war. On a daily basis, our newspaper, both on east and west side, describe a very tense situation. For many weeks, this town, Kirkenes, was occupied by a lot of journalists that normally doesn't travel in this region. Together with local journalists, they tried to explain the immigration and the refugee situation. And further south, we had a situation that made headlines on the front page every day, the Ukrainian situation. And from a Western point of view, Western newspaper, Western broadcasting told the truth and nothing but the truth. So that is what we are going to challenge. Is that really right? We have a panel, a combination of Norwegian and Russian journalists and researchers. Please take your seat, gentlemen. There is no ladies, I'm sorry for that. And it's too late to change that. On my left-hand side, the far left side, Alexei Kovalov, journalist and blogger from Russia. He has created a blog that goes behind the headlines, try to explain how story ends up the way story ends up. And then I think it's Lars Rove, the next one, a researcher from the Fridtjof Nansen Institute in Norway. He is what we could call a real expert on the Russian situation on the Norwegian side, and I'm glad you're here. He has written several books about Russia and and taking active part in the discussion about Norwegian-Russian relationships. Then we have Kjetil Stormark, editor-in-chief of the newspaper Aldri Mer, translated, I guess, Nevermore. It's an easy translation. He investigates in defense and security issues, and for the last year also about the Russian situation. And here, closest to me, Andrei Privalikin, journalist from the neighbor town of Kirkenes, Murmansk, has worked as a television reporter, made movies and films, today working in the radio station. So, you are very welcome, and stay friends, but don't agree on everything, I hope. Normally, when I talk about the situation between Norway and Russia in different connection, I talk about the only border among 13 or 14, if you like, that has always been peaceful and has no war going on, the border between Norway and Russia, Storskog. But that was until you, Kjetil Stormark, told me and other people I'm wrong. There is going on a war between Norway and Russia. Please explain for me.
Yeah, well, there's kind of a increased tension, as you probably noticed, between Russia and NATO, and sort of in the aftermath of what happened in Crimea in February and March 2014, and what has been happening in Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Russia has expanded its abilities and focus on both influencing other countries, enhancing pressure on European countries, and also using different techniques and methods to communicate what we call STATCOM, strategic communication, and strategic messages to different governments. Before the flow of refugees started over the Norwegian-Russian border in the north at Storskog, representatives of the FSB, the Russian security police, started hinting in talks with the Norwegian counterparts here in Finnmark that there was a substantial number of refugees residing in the Kola Peninsula. A number of 15,000 was mentioned, and there was no particular any sort of reason for them bringing up the issue at all. It just came out of the blue. A few months later, the flow of refugees started. There has been published quite a lot of information showing that the FSB and other parts of the Russian system has brokered and done what they can to motivate people and at least not stopping the refugees from coming to Norway. They have to pass through a heavily guarded border area with 3 border control stations and posts, and there's been information also published in Russian media about a company in St. Petersburg offering visas and offering deals for Syrian refugees. There's been a raid against that particular company doing this, but according to one Russian newspaper, Russian authorities has been aware of those activities for at least a year or more.
Yeah, sorry, I have to stop you, because most of what you're telling we have read in other newspaper, but what I'm asking you, you was the one who called it a war. That it's a tense situation, we all know.
Different people might use different expressions.
Yeah, but war is quite specific, isn't it?
The military sort of term for this is hybrid warfare. And the Russians are the best ones in actually doing it. You saw it happen in Crimea, small green men, as the expression goes, people without any identification on them, obviously military, highly well-trained people doing raids and forcing Ukrainian officers to surrender and getting access to Ukrainian bases. It took a year for Vladimir Putin to admit that they were actually behind everything, that they actually directed and orchestrated everything happening in Crimea.
But that's the Ukrainian situation. But when you use the term war, you're talking about the situation here between on Storskog, and you are referring to sources.
Yes,
which nobody knows.
It's quite striking actually, because it wasn't actually a story that the people inside the defense apparatus in Norway actually wanted me to write. It was quite unpopular that I actually wrote the story, because the current understanding in Norway and other countries inside the NATO family is that they try to keep the situation under control by not challenging Russia too much, at least not calling everything in the public domain as they see it. There's a lot of stuff happening that we don't get to know about. But what I wrote was a de facto understanding in parts of the system.
You referred to sources. Why didn't you name the sources?
You're an experienced reporter, and I suspect that you know the answer to the question.
No, not really, because there was a lot of open sources in NATO. Yeah, but there may be some Russian sources.
Let's not be naive. If I identified the source, I would have. If I did that, I would have been. I had to do it against the source's will, and they would lose their jobs over it.
But when you accuse a country of,
perhaps also face criminal prosecution for leaking classified material.
But when you accuse a country of having a war against another country, wouldn't that be natural to ask this country what their opinion is?
I didn't get a question entirely.
Wouldn't it be an ordinary journalistic work to ask Russian open sources to comment on your accusing?
Oh yeah, I've approached the Russian embassy quite a lot, and they're not too eager to comment. Also, the consul general earlier here in Kirkenes.
Have you tried? Have you tried to get any comments from the Russians?
Of course, it follows sort of the approach of ordinary reporting, but you don't sort of. It's not very controversial that Russians don't want to admit what they're doing.
It's pretty controversial to accuse Russia to trying to destabilize Norway, isn't it?
Can I take one step to the side and say one thing? The way that you approach this topic shows me that the Russians has been immensely successful, actually. Because,
Thank
you. They're actually really professional in doing information campaigns and information warfare. They are much more experienced in doing that than the NATO system is. One example of how this folds out is, and I'm not suggesting that what happened, for example, with Barents Observer, which is a case that I would like to just mention briefly. At the same time, or at least before everything started happening with the conflict surrounding Barents Observer, I've published this not in a story but on Facebook. It's social media postings is also publishing somewhat. The reason why I didn't do for a story on it was that NRK Dagsrevyen beat me to it. They also did the story on it, but the Russian security police, FSB, worked systematically trying to influence authority figures on the Norwegian side, telling them that they thought Barents Observer had become a problem, that they were too critical of Russia, and particularly the editor should be replaced.
So the reason
that happened at the same time, or ahead of time, before the conflict started. Let me just elaborate or emphasize that I don't have any foundation to suggest that what actually happened was in any way or shape or form connected to what FSB did. But they had activities going on with the same motivation as the consequence eventually became. They are rather cynical in how they perform their duties.
So yeah, I know it's a lot. So to put it short, the reason you didn't ask for a Russian comment was that you was afraid you would be in the same situation.
You're not
as
listening.
me.
You're not listening, Anna.
Yeah, I do.
I've been in contact with the Russian embassy on several occasions, and
but they won't comment on it.
The press attaché says that they would consider doing an interview, but they would need to talk to Moscow first and see if they're able to get back with a comment at all.
Well, I can show you some interview with Russia about this issue to tell you how to do it, but let's move on. You are Russian, so you are mixed up in your head, as Kjetil said, and don't understand what's going on. Now you are listening to Norwegian journalistic methods to explain the relation between Norway and Russia. What do you think? You need the microphone.
Well,
is there a war going on between our nations?
I don't understand the word itself, because when you phoned me and offered to take part in that discussion, they named information war. I can understand separately each word. Information means information, is it? And the main thing for information, it should be true. And war is war. War means weapons, soldiers, and propaganda. That is war. And if war, what can you say about the result? Result of the war. Somebody wins, somebody lost the war. If we are speaking now about information war, who will win? Whose lies was more unbelievable to believe? Or what? What we are speaking about? We are quite strange people, journalists. We like to speak about things in which we understood almost nothing. But we can. Well, for instance, we like to discuss freedom of speech. The things which never been, not in even one country all over the world. But we are ready to discuss. Now we are ready to discuss information war. It seems to me that if it is war, that automatically means soldiers. I am not a soldier. I try to be journalist. So, and there is no journalism in information war, only propaganda. And the methods from East and West are practically the same. Everything is known for many, many years. It is competition. Which lies will be more unbelievable to believe. And that is all. So if you are a journalist, you will never participate in the information war. Because, well, for example, for instance, our methods are absolutely the same. Example. If something is good in Russia, it is because of Mr. Putin. If something is wrong in Russia, it is because of Mr. Obama. That's propaganda. That's not journalism. And it seems to me that for the West, you have, let's say, verbal law only with two items. The first one, Russia is always wrong. The second one, if Russia is right, see the first one. That is all at the moment.
How would you refer to the phrase yourself, the freedom of the press? What does that phrase mean for you?
For me, maybe it's something maybe we will reach somewhere, sometime. But it seems to me never. Anyway, well, there are some things which I will never discuss, things about which I will never write even a word. What does it mean? Maybe censor, it is, and it is in my head. Not in a big house with a lot of white colors.
What do you mean that is something you won't write about?
No, we are now discussing information war, and not the things which Andrei Privalikhin is ready to write or is not ready to write.
But
we can discuss separately as a topic for next discussion, maybe next year.
But the question is, what kind of reliable sources?
Okay, I will tell you one thing. I will never try to teach another people how to do things in a proper way, because maybe I am wrong, not they. But it seems to me that a lot of people trying to teach Russia
to
do this, not to do that and that and that.
How do you feel that is, because that is a part of what we in the title here call the information war. How do the Russian people act on the way you feel of blaming Russia for everything that is wrong?
Oh, you know that I'm sure that some of people, they believe. And it seems to me that the percentage of that people is in every country practically the same. Maybe, I don't know exactly, maybe 10% only. And it is in Norway, it is in Russia, it is in the United Kingdom. Yeah. Maybe 10%, but in Norway it will be 450,000 people. And in Russia will be almost 15 million. But the matter is that we can watch, well, we can watch our TV. We can watch Norwegian TV, US TV. We can use websites from different sides. I mean, West, East, North and South. And after that, if you are clever enough to make conclusion for yourself, you will find the truth somewhere in between. No?
Do the people trust you as a journalist?
Me?
I don't mean you personal, but journalists.
We'd better ask people.
You know people.
I hope. And it seems to me if people believe journalists, it seems to me it's the main reason why they are working, if they are really journalists, not propagandists.
You said that you can watch American television and Norwegian television. Do you feel that Russian journalists trust the Western media?
Oh, I don't think so. But the matter is, you see, well, we are now already speaking about Ukraine, yeah? Let's say, I would like to investigate the moon.
The moon?
Yes, the moon. Okay. I realize that I will never reach the moon. I will investigate the moon sitting on the chair on the earth. Because it's impossible for me. But if I will try to tell the truth about Ukraine, about the Crimea, about Donetsk, about Lugansk, I have possibility to go there, to speak with people, not with embassy in Moscow or embassy in Kiev, with common people. A friend of mine, very good Norwegian journalist, he celebrated New Year in Ukraine. This year, 2016, not in black part of Ukraine, I mean Crimea, Donetsk and Lugansk, but on the light part. And he said, I made a lot of friends, Ukrainians, excellent people. It's very hard times for them now, but they are trying. But about modern Ukrainian government, it is something. That's his conclusion. He was there.
One last question in this part of the debate, Andrei. The Sputnik News. What kind of newspaper is that?
What newspaper?
Yeah,
I've never read.
You never read it?
No.
You don't trust it?
I've never read. How can I trust or not to trust if I never read?
That's a good point.
Yes?
That's a good point. But you know the newspaper?
No.
You don't know
No.
Sputnik News?
No.
Okay. Let's move on. Thank you very much so far.
I'm old, lazy, stupid Russian journalist.
Alexei, let's just hang on the last part of
Is it on? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on. Last part of my question. You have heard about Sputnik News.
Oh yes.
Could you describe that?
Okay, this was originally this was intended as a debate between me and someone from Sputnik News, but once they found that it was going to be me on the panel, they immediately refused.
Why is that?
I have a story about Sputnik News. There is a parody Twitter account of Sputnik on Twitter, and every once in a while somebody confuses them for the real thing because they're so difficult to tell apart, the parody account of Sputnik and the real Sputnik Twitter. Sputnik is an international news agency founded by Dmitry Kiselyov, who is a huge fan of Norway, by the way. And he's very much missing it. He's under personal sanctions and he cannot come to Norway, where he very much likes fishing, and he has to do his fishing in Murmansk now, which apparently he hates. So this was this news agency was set up with the directive of showing the Russian point of view to the world. But as it turns out, the point is not showing how good Russia is, but to show how bad the West is at everything, how nefarious the West is, how it manipulates, and how it wages the an information war against Russia. And here we come to an interesting point, because when you are inside Russia, whenever you hear, what you hear on television is that it's not Russia that is waging the information war, but the rest of the world is waging the information war against Russia. And do we have to retaliate? And this is where they effectively give themselves the license to lie, to deceive. Which is why my blog is called The Noodle Remover. We have an excellent, very graphic expression in Russia. To hang noodles on someone's ears is to lie, is to deceive. So I'm removing those noodles. And Sputnik is a very common antagonist of my stories.
So Sputnik is a kind of noodle in your eyes.
Oh yes. So I was really hoping to see someone from Sputnik face to face.
Yeah, but that is true, as you said. We tried to get them here, but they denied. Maybe it was because of you, but I have a feeling that they normally don't take part in this kind of debates.
Oh yes, they have been very carefully dodging any personal encounters with me, and people have been some publications have been trying to elicit a comment, elicit a reaction from Sputnik or Russia Today about my blog, about my writings about them, but they have been very skillfully dodging the questions.
Would you call Sputnik News journalists at all?
No, not really. You see, as it often happens in Russia, Russia uses democratic institutions like elections and press to very undemocratic means. So Sputnik is essentially very much a propaganda machine. So it has it looks like a website. It looks like a news website. Yes, it is a website, and it looks very much like a news publications. It had headlines and bylines and stories, But one example of the kind of stories they're running is, it's one of my favorite. Oh, I love this one. So there's a couple of months ago on Sputnik there was this headline. Okay, former U.S. intelligence officer says that Putin is the best thing that happened to Russia in 100 years. It's been reposted like 1,000 times on Russian media, and when I Googled the name of this supposed U.S. intelligence officer, it just so happened that he was imprisoned for 3 years impersonating a U.S. intelligence officer, and he lived for a couple of months using forged documents on a U.S. military base, and then finally he was caught drunk at this base with a trunk full of firearms, and he was imprisoned for 3 years. And right after he was released, he appeared on Sputnik as an expert in Putin, and said how great Putin is, how Putin is the best thing that happened to Russia in 100 years. That's the kind of experts Sputnik uses.
Today's headline in Sputnik News is that Russian air forces have pinpointed with bombs 1,900 terrorist cells in Syria the last week. They don't tell which one are the terrorists.
Okay, this is by the rate they are going. Approximately 150 terrorist cells in a day. I'm pretty sure they must have run out of terrorist cells by now.
You are a Russian journalist, which have lived in Cyprus and moving to London now. Why is that?
Well, because I'm a citizen of the world. Well, I am Russian, and I'm a Russian in heart and mind, and I love Russia, but some family circumstances and job offers have me moving around the world.
So, but do you feel that you, as a journalist in Russia, have the freedom of press?
You see, this is the difficult thing. I, as a journalist, am enjoying as a Russian journalist. I am currently enjoying full, unrestricted freedom of press. I can write whatever I want about. And only once in my lifetime, one of my, not even my stories was censored, not even censored, just moved down on a website to be less visible. And this is when I was working at state news agency RIA Novosti. And of course, some of my colleagues are in a really dire situation right now, and the legal situation, they have been introducing one after another very restrictive laws. And what we have now, when we think of independent news outlets in Russia, such as Echo Moskvy or Novaya Gazeta, they are in fact very much dependent on the state, and the state needs them as token of their benevolence. So whenever someone accuses Putin of stamping out free press, he can always say, but look, we have Echo Moskvy or Novaya Gazeta, although any of them can be closed down with one switch, one very physical switch. So it's my situation is I don't know, maybe unique because because I'm a freelancer and I live outside of Russia, but I can think and say and write pretty much whatever I want.
When you heard, one last question in this round, when you heard Kjetil described the situation between Norway and Russia, he using his journalistic methods, did it make any reflection in your way of thinking about journalism?
I must confess I'm not much acquainted with the way Norwegian media cover Russia, but if it's the same as most Western media, then I suspect that it suffers from the same ills. The coverage of Russia is not really much that different from any other coverage in the sense of that journalists are now under an immense pressure to chase trends, to attract as many clicks as possible by using really primitive, deprived of nuance, clickbaiting headlines and such. And this leads to maybe a skewed a vision of Russia as inherently a corrupt place where nothing good ever happens. But here's the problem. There's obviously the problem of confirmation bias, because both editors and the audience expect certain kind of stories about Russia. And there was a failed journalistic experiment in Russia a few years ago. A local editor, an editor of a local newspaper, decided to run only positive stories to make people happier. The newspaper only lasted 2 months after that, because this is how Russia Today started in 2005. It tried to present a more positive image of Russia to the world, but nobody, especially nobody in Russia, was interested in how good Russia is. But then they found a really unique and excellent and effective way and turned themselves into a global phenomenon. Today, Russia Today is not about how good Russia is, but about how bad America is. And that's how they are winning hearts and minds, especially in the United States itself. Because, let's face it, millions of people in the world hate America. And there's a demand, and Russia Today is supplying.
Thank you so far. That is an excellent bridge over to you, Lars. When you have heard now 3 different journalists, you are a researcher yourselves. Is it possible for you to compare your methods with what you have heard here as a scientist?
Well, the comparison would then be something like this. I would never, ever have gotten anything published if I followed Kjetil Stormark's methods, I must say that.
Why is that?
Because as long as Kjetil Stormark does not present or name his sources, I will just have to think or believe that his theories are a product of his own very lively imagination, plus some sources online, possibly. I also believe that there are plenty of people in the various defense establishments that are very interested in so-called hybrid warfare, or cyber warfare, for example, other new modern ways of waging war, that they create theories about how this can be done does not mean that they actually happen. When Mr. Stormark explains the Storskog problem or the situation that arose in this area last November as part of Russian hybrid warfare, I think he is very thoroughly mistaken. The situation was, in fact, that a stream of refugees, migrants, people who wanted to come to Norway, came over this so-called Arctic route. There has been no change in Russian practice, either at Titovka or at Pechenga, the 2 posts before the border. I can name my sources on that. Those sources are Border Commissioners Ulf Mathisen and the retired Border Commissioner Frode Berg. I can also name a very high source in the Norwegian military establishment, Mr. Robert Mood, who is now the head of the Norwegian NATO delegation. Now, Mr. Stormark also says that these people would probably lose their job if they promote such theories. I don't believe that is true. Oberstleutnant, that is Colonel Lieutenant and the main teacher at the Defense College in Oslo, wrote a very public opinion piece in a Norwegian newspaper. I ended up in a debate with him and told him exactly the same thing as I'm trying to tell Mr. Stormark today. I don't know if it's more relevant that he's actually in the army and has a position there, or if he was at some point a member of Oslo FRP, which is a populist party in Norway, by the way. He also said that, to my knowledge, he has not been fired. So even though he went very far in describing Russian hybrid warfare, so-called. Now, if Mr.
Just one question here. I'll give you a follow-up. So what you're saying that, I mean, Robert Mood has given a lot of interviews about this situation. So what you're saying that you don't believe that when Mood is talking to open sources, he says something else than he's saying to Kjetil Stormark?
That might very well be, of course. But the fact of the matter is that Stormark has not been able to name any sources. And as long as he can't do that, I cannot be expected to take him seriously. Especially not when I know that this specific case of Storskog and the border situation up here is very explainable by a number of facts. For example, when Stormark says that, you mentioned that the Russians had hinted out of the blue, so to speak, that there were 15,000 refugees. 15,000? Yes, right? 15,
yeah, that's what he said, yeah.
15,000. Yeah, 15,000 refugees located in the Murmansk Oblast. Okay, I know the reason for that, because I have spoken to the people who were at that meeting and who wrote the minutes from that meeting. They were worried about their security zone. They wanted the Norwegian side to agree to a firmer text that was to be given to all third-party country citizens who did not have a Schengen visa. Now, I have the two texts, the one that existed before and the one that existed after. That last text came into being for one reason, and that was that the volume increased in November. Do you remember that? The volume increased. That's the only difference. Now, if you think that Russian authorities can create streams of people, you must document it. Please document it.
So, I was going to take you in now, Kjetil. It doesn't seem like you get much support from Lars here on your anonymous sources and accusation. How do you react to that?
First, I want to say that suggesting that my reporting is a figment of my imagination is a slanderous remark. It's almost libelous. I wouldn't expect it from a researcher such as you. It's not professional to meet people in a discussion about such a great topic in such a way. But I will forgive you. It's okay.
What you could do, Kjetil, is to try to explain why he's wrong.
I'm not done yet.
Why is he wrong?
If you use me as a punching bag, I have to be allowed to respond somewhat. Regarding the Norwegian Defense College, the person speaking and actually voicing the same concerns, the same views, the same thoughts as I did, almost to the mark. There has been a discussion actually within the Norwegian Defense Forces that they are too free in the media group at the Norwegian Defense College. They've been heavily criticized. There's a discussion whether they should be allowed to continue doing their job. He took heavy criticism within the system after saying what he did. But he is one of the few people who has been given a role where he is allowed to take part in public debate. So please keep that in mind. For the most part, people within the system has to abide by the discipline of what the people on the top decides will be the main approach in the crisis management. And for the time being, the current strategy of the Norwegian government has been the one that became self-evident when Børge Brende, in his frustration, asked if lawyers and other people criticizing Russia could lower their voices. That was not clever to say from a politician who wants to become the next leader of the political party Høyre. And nevertheless, he said it. And that means that the Norwegian government feels that the situation is extremely difficult to handle. And if you think for 1 second that it's possible to pass through a heavily guarded border area, through 3 different checkpoints, that FSB on a local initiative decides to allow a flow of thousands of refugees to Norway without actually checking with somebody at a higher level in the command chain, you have, okay, if it's I don't believe that. I know it for a fact actually that
isn't that
the Norwegian,
strange, Lars?
Hold on a minute. One more. I have to. There's been punches and punches there. So I have a couple of more remarks. Again. This is a fact. The Norwegian Foreign Service has information that the Russian Foreign Service, for example, in Egypt, has used travel agencies to market the possibility of going on a vacation to Norway for Egyptians. It's an organized endeavor, and if you, for 1 second, believe that this is just a random coincidence, okay, it's a dangerous thing to be so naive now, faced with a country that has moved borders in Europe for the first time using military force since the Second World War.
So if you let me ask the question, that is just the question I was going to ask Lars. It's not about believing, but as Kjetil said, how is it possible that refugees go through the border?
Well, let's remember that before this situation arose in November, these same people, just in very, very low numbers, very handleable numbers, came over the border every year. 2 this year, 7 next year, 10 next year. This has been the situation since the late 90s. All of a sudden, the volumes increase quickly. The practice on the Russian side, at both checkpoints and the border itself, has not changed. There has not been an active change of Russian practice in this situation. They have simply done what they have done before, namely letting these people come to the border, the Norwegian border, and seek asylum or whatever. They have handed them a message stating that since you do not have a visa for Schengen, you will probably not get, or you will have to apply for a visa. I have the original text here if you're interested. Now, after the meeting in before the refugee flow stopped, this text was changed. And the text was very clear that you will most likely be sent back to Russia if you try this. So that is a change in the situation, and the formulation of that piece of paper that was given to the third-party residents or citizens without a visa that text was a result of negotiations between Russian and Norwegian border commissaries. Now, I have no illusion that, from what I hear, that Stormark and I will come to any agreement here. I think actually,
this is not a peace negotiation, so you don't need to agree.
Well, we can keep going on that. I don't think that is the most interesting thing, and I don't.
No, I agree with you. Well, I disagree in a part because this is very interesting. This is the information war. But I want to go to Andrei.
No, just one. I have.
Kjetil, you have the word. No, I will get back to you. No, please.
It's really connected what he said.
Do I have to steal the microphone from you? Please give it to Andrei. Be polite. Andrei, you have heard about the description. This is what I call the information war. When you are accusing. You live in Murmansk.
Yes.
How would you explain when you have heard about what Western media writes about the refugee situation across the border? I don't know if you have seen any of the refugees yourself, but how do you react on this description as a Russian journalist?
Well, you see, the situation about refugees, it is, how should I say, it's very hard. They say, people are running from the war. Is it? Is it? Where is the war? In Syria. Yes? They are running. Norway has a border between Syria and Norway. They cross the border of Syria. There's no war. If they really run from the war, the first stop is out of Syria. They must be more or less good, because there is no bombing.
Where is that no bombing, you say? In Syria?
No. They are running from Syria because of the war.
Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Which country is the nearest? Turkey. There is no war in Turkey, but they don't like Turkey. They don't want to stay in Turkey.
But that's quite a few refugees in Turkey as well.
Probably they are waiting that tomorrow will be the war will be in Turkey. Yeah. They prefer Norway. So you see, as for Norwegians, again, Russia is guilty. It's quite easy because you have onshore border only with 3 countries. Swedes are your Scandinavian brothers. Finns are your northern cousins. The third one, who? Russia, again. Russia is guilty. Excellent position. So, what is our fault? If, for instance, I will live there the war, probably I will take a gun. If run, everything will be okay with me, where there will be no war, in the nearest country. And I mentioned ground border. Norway is a northern country. They can't use, like in Italy or Greece, rubber boats. It's bloody cold for Syrian, and not only Syrian, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, Iran, I don't know exactly. Probably it will be possibility for them to stay in Russia. They don't want. They don't want. Maybe you are guilty because you are so wealthy. Who knows?
Fat and rich.
Yes, fat and rich.
Alexei, is there at all any coverage on this situation in Russian newspaper, as far as you know?
Well, last thing I heard was a rumor, a very persistent rumor, reported by several newspapers and websites in Russia, despite being thoroughly debunked and rejected by the authorities, is that this is the byproduct of the crisis you are describing. So the story goes like this: 50 Syrian refugees deported from Norway for bad behavior. Well, I'm retelling this as verbatim as possible. 50 refugees deported from Norway for bad behavior went to a nightclub in Murmansk and started assaulting girls there. And out of the blue, another 50 Russian Viteses, or knights in shining armor, beat them up so bloody that they couldn't recognize each other or something, and even the hospital wouldn't take them, and they would hunt them down in the streets. And the story goes on and on. It's circulating and circulating. I can see it circulating on the social media right now.
They wrote that they decided they're still in Europe.
Yep, and
we show them that we are not Europe.
Yes, this is basically the comments section that Andrei is now describing. The comment section under every article about this incident. And despite the fact that there is not a single photographic evidence, and the authorities deny everything, but this story, a very typical juxtaposition of weak and degenerate Europe and politically incorrect but chivalrous Russians, showing those so-called refugees who's who. And this is it's a very persistent story. It's still going on, and it shows how difficult it is to debunk even the most absurd story, because it taps nicely into people's confirmation bias. Russians want to see themselves as, the strong alternative to weak Europe.
Could you, that is a kind of a description of journalistic methods. Could you say a little bit more, Alexei, how do, in your view, Russian media work?
Okay, in the past couple of weeks, I've given at least a dozen interviews to the German media, and everybody kept asking the same question. Okay. Is Russia waging an information war against us? They were referring to another story, also thoroughly debunked, the alleged rape of the 13-year-old Russian girl in Berlin by migrants. So the Germans' thinking is that someone in the Kremlin actually directed a propaganda campaign aimed at Germany, because there are at least 4 million Russian speakers in Germany, and some of them, quite a few of them actually, maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions, consume. The only source of information for them is the Russian TV channels that broadcast on Germany. So the German thinking is that Russia is deliberately inciting racial hatred inside Germany with these TV reports. But because I know a bit about how Russian media work, and I'm always telling them, although I have a feeling that my German colleagues refuse to believe me, is that Russia is waging an information war against their own citizens, and what they are seeing, what they see in Germany, the more active behavior of right-wing movements and parties excited by these TV reports about the alleged rapes committed by migrants is merely a byproduct, because the collapse of Europe under the pressure of hordes of migrants is just one in a series of changing agendas in Russian TV, with the sole purpose. This is the main purpose. Of distracting the audience from the very real problems that they are facing, like the sharp increase in the price of commodities. This is a very real fact that most Russians are facing, that the price of bread has doubled in the past couple of years as a direct result of Russia's involvement in at least 2 active wars and sanctions and counter-sanctions. But you won't hear about it on Russian TV, because although the second biggest TV channel in Russia is called Россия, on a typical news bulletin, you won't hear much about Russia. All you hear at the moment is Europe, refugees, Europe, refugees, crisis. Maybe half a year ago, it was Ukraine, and how Ukraine is how power in Ukraine was taken over by a fascist junta, and then it was Syria. How our brave and soldiers are triumphantly winning and crushing terrorists in Syria, and now it's the crisis in Europe. And then maybe in a couple of weeks it will be something else. But the effects that Europe is feeling from these TV reports is merely a byproduct. So in the information war is against Russia itself.
Thank you, Kjetil. A more general question, but it has a lot to do with what we are talking about. Do we accept, as journalists and as editors, less acknowledge and less open sources because we are writing about another country than we would have done if we was writing about situation in our own country?
No, it's not about that. It's about protecting people from prosecution and losing their jobs if you deal with classified material. It is using different techniques and methods, trying to get the story out if it's important enough. It's not a good thing to use anonymous sources. I agree completely that it always has to be an ambition to avoid it, but in many different cases it is really hard to get important stories out without using anonymous sources. So it's more about the topic of what you're reporting, not being a part of an information war. It is important as you not to be naive as a reporter. There's no shining knight or white knight on with shining armor, and I'm not sure what the expression is, out there. The US is rather manipulative in trying to influence reporters to do stories the way they want them to be done. But in the sort of security situation following Ukraine and Crimea, it is obvious that the Russians are kind of winning the information war. It's striking how far they're willing to go in the views expressed. I interviewed not long ago a Finnish academic who is rather friendly towards the Russian system, and he voiced a view in full sort of seriousness and said that he knew that killing of Anna Politkovskaya was staged by Western media to do a campaign against Vladimir Putin. This is a guy who is used over and over again in different parts of Russian media. And that scares me quite a lot. Just one more sentence, the thing I actually tried to say when you cut me off. If you think it's a figment of an imagination, and I should direct your attention, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Finnish media they actually was able to do it with open sources, has stated that after the flow of refugees stopped to the Norwegian border, the same thing started in a smaller scale to happen towards the Finnish border. And they have actually said out loud that the FSB is actually brokering and organizing and motivating what is happening.
But it's pretty much more than one sentence.
Perhaps Finnish authorities are lying, I'm not sure, but it's believe what you want. But there are quite a lot of different sources out there if you want to see the truth.
Lars, you can comment on that, and then I want you to summarize this in a way, because you have written about how this, what you call lack of acknowledge about the Russian society in Norwegian and Western media, that it in a way harm the situation between these two countries. Could you please say a little bit about that?
Well, as just to Kjetil's last comment, for sure, if you can give me a source. Again, I need a source, and then I will. And Finnish media is not as such a source. I would need a name, and I need a document possibly. I need someone to vouch for this information. Now, I have plenty of very good explanations for what happened at Storskog, and I've tried to convey some of it.
Afterwards.
Perfect. Anyway, we're not going to agree on that, as I said earlier. Russia is different. Russia is undemocratic. Russia is big. Russia is ambitious. Russia wants power. All these elements that can describe Russia are completely and utterly acceptable, because we have no choice. Plus, it's in a nation's right to be big, to be different, to be undemocratic, to be all these things. But Russia breaks rules. Russia lies, and Russia, I mean, there are lots of things to criticize about Russia, and we should not stop doing that. These are important things, but we have to criticize with knowledge. We do not need, I mean, as I said, there are so many things to criticize. Reality is far more exciting than I need it to be. I am also quite worried and frightened to some extent by the development. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's just stick to reality. And if we can't do that, let's just keep it to ourselves. I think so, until we can document our statements. I think that is very important. And in our situation now, we are faced with a Russian media, as Alexei has described, that is actually somehow maybe waging a war or trying to create this image of the West, of, you know, in a very, very small degree of Norway, because Norway is really not very important, very high on Moscow's agenda, I must say. Let's just relate to that. Let's look at it. Let's identify the lies. Let's try to argue against them, but let's not produce lies against these lies. Let's stick to what we know.
Thank you, Lars, and we will stick to the reality, and the reality is that we have used over time. And I want to say thank you to the panel who quit while there still is temperature in the debate, and thank you very much to the audience. It's been fun being here. Thank you very much.